Africa, quality education for nation being achieving the impossible based on the outcome of unbelievable surge of Swaziland's now, Eswatini's, highest possible performance in the Cambridge Overseas Examination since independence under the UNESCO/SIDA Project 503/SWA/13, 1985-88 by Dr. Lulsegged Alamayo. Dr. Lulsegged was the Chief Technical Advisor of the UNESCO/SIDA Education Project 503/SWA/13 in Swaziland, mid-June 1985 to the end of 1987. Other UNESCO long assignments included Ed. Planning Expert, University of Cape Coast, in Ghana, November 1975 to January 1977. B. Specialist in Educational Management, University of Ibadan, in Nigeria, December 1977 to August 1983, and C. Chief Technical Advisor for Population and Family Life Information Education and Communication, IEC, Nigeria, March 1990 to March 1994. Educational background. Certificate, Writing for Children, George Washington University, Washington, D.C. BSc, Ed., University of Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, MSc, Ed., and EDD, University of Southern California, Los Angeles, California. Introduction. Background. In the last 3 decades, since the onset of political independence among the former African colonies of Belgium, Britain, and France, particularly after the UNESCO/ECA 1961 Addis Ababa Conference on African Education, the educational systems of most African states have expanded tremendously. Incidentally, the quantitative increases in school enrollment have not been complemented by qualitative improvements in terms of either efficiency or scholastic attainment. On the contrary, standards have been stagnating or deteriorating to the point where UNDP, UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Bank have had to intervene independently and collectively through various forms of technical assistance for capacity building in the school system subsector. In addition, these agencies had convened an international conference on education for all 1990 to discuss how to reverse the problems of access to and quality in education. The resolutions and recommendations of the Education for All Conference are yet to be embraced by many African countries. Technical assistance for capacity building Kingdom of Swaziland. For over 30 years, technical assistance has been given by many bilateral, multilateral, and regional donor agencies to enhance the educational, institution, and human resource capacities of African countries. Such assistance has been provided in various forms including skilled personnel, expertise, e.g. training, fellowships, and study tours, as well as provision of equipment and materials. However, there has been persistent concern among both donor agencies and recipient countries over the impact of the technical assistance in general and educational capacity building projects in particular on the improvement of the quality of education provided. Most of the impact assessments so far have yielded inconclusive results. Several reasons can be adduced for this, namely, the high degree of ambiguity concerning the meaning, direction, and scope of capacity building. The fact that capacity building is a long-term process, often beyond the span of the technical assistance projects. The lack of clarity over the specific indicators of technical assistance outputs for determining its efficacy. Studies and reports on impacts of technical assistance are generated from generalized surveys based on limited samples. The rate of returns or cost-benefit ratio parameters used for assessing impact of capacity building projects have been difficult to justify, having been focused on rates of delivery rather than on impact analysis, and the measures of sustainability and self-reliance, which could facilitate judgment of the efficacy of projects, have been glossed over by assessors. In the light of the above reasons, the impact assessment results presented in this case study have focused on the outcomes of a capacity-building training activity as determined by student performance during the period under study, coupled with follow-up observations and inferences based on the identified performance indicators. Even though this long overdue unpublished report has been carried out over 2 decades ago, the author believes that its relevancy and usefulness cannot be understated and is still current and valid. Context of the project. The Kingdom of Swaziland, now called Eswatini, has a unique geographical, demographic, and strategic position in the southern Africa subregion. The total population is less than 1 million. The major occupation is agriculture, mostly small-scale farming, with over 75% of the population engaged in one form of farming or the other. There are very few mineral resources of economic significance in Swaziland. Much of the economy is dependent on the country's relationship with South Africa. The nation as a whole has this collective will and commitment to protect, preserve, and maintain its social and cultural identity and institutional structures. Because of the very limited human and material resources, there is a strong emphasis on education as a means of safeguarding the socio-cultural heritage of the nation, its economic survival, and enhancing its overall development. By 1985, Swaziland had achieved a near 100% implementation of universal primary education as well as full democratization of educational opportunities at all levels. In 1984, Swaziland undertook an education sector review, the Nsibben Commission, to identify the problem areas in the national education system. One of the major problems identified by the Commission was, in Marx et al. Words, the need to improve the areas of leadership and human dynamics, since the educational leader's job is to make things happen through the efforts of people. This leadership problem demanded immediate solution. Further investigation of the implementation aspect of the national education confirmed that within the educational system, principals/head teachers who ideally should concentrate on management and supervisory roles felt more comfortable teaching classes rather than spending most of their time on instructional leadership. This was precisely because they lacked the professional training in management to effectively and efficiently organize, coordinate, and motivate teachers and in turn students in their respective teaching and learning. Adequate management and administrative structures must be put in place in order to accentuate teachers' efforts. The lack of management competence in the organization, administration, and supervision of the education system identified by the Nsibben Commission, 1985, was echoed even more forcefully by the World Bank in its 1987 report on education in sub-Saharan Africa. The report declared that, despite more than 2 decades of investment in education, management capacity remains strained and insufficiently developed. The author of this research report was invited to Swaziland as a UNESCO consultant during the final deliberation of the Nsibben Commission's sector review, at which time he articulated these needs and suggested detailed solution in his report, Dialogue to Reform in Education, Challenge of Swaziland, January 1985. Responding to the recommendations of the above report in the context of the Nsibben Commission, the Swazi Ministry of Education requested UNESCO/SIDA Project of Educational Planning and Research 503/SWA/13, 1982-87, to undertake a program of management development in the country. This case study, therefore, is the outcome of that management development program designed and implemented by the author in Swaziland in his capacity as the Chief Technical Advisor of the UNESCO/SIDA project during the period June 1985 to December 1987. The project activity included a substantial component of training for all institutional academic management and administrative personnel from the vice minister down to schools principals and vice principals, and for others directly connected with instructional, administration, and supervision. Planning stage. Assumptions. There were 4 key assumptions adopted in planning the management development programs of this project, namely, that no educational system can improve more quickly than the teachers who deliver the education. In other words, the quality and standards of any educational system depend on the good quality and full commitment of the teachers, and all other hierarchies must be facilitators. Teacher quality and teacher productivity are not constant attributes. These 2 factors tend to depreciate with time unless they are constantly boosted and revitalized through updating, upgrading, and revitalizing of knowledge and skills, appropriate diagnostic supervision of instruction, and viable management and accountability policy which allow teachers to participate in school decision-making processes. This will help them to develop greater professional commitment and concern. 3. The proper functioning of any large organization depends on the identification and development of organizational structures which are appropriate to the composition, nature, and goals of that organization. For example, Given the differing needs and demands in Swaziland, the system would appreciate a highly decentralized administrative setup in which schools are given more autonomy with adequate numbers of qualified and dedicated staff at each responsibility level in each institution, and all other hierarchies are contributors and facilitators of the teacher to give quality teaching and the student getting quality learning. 4. A decentralized system will require very clear and carefully defined functional relationships among each of the administrative setups from the ministry right through to the institutional level with learner as the focal point. This will allow the institutions to have relative freedom to plan, organize, and administer instruction and to introduce new and innovative ideas appropriate to the learner, the child and youth. Project goals and specific objectives of the training program. Long-term goals. The desired long-term goal of the Management Development Program is 1. To improve the quality of education at the primary and secondary levels through improvement of the school management and instructional delivery systems, and 2. To firmly establish accountability in education at these levels. Specific objectives. 1. To improve school management practices through inculcation of modern management techniques of organization, leadership, and accountability. In education. 2. To enhance teacher classroom management and instructional delivery competencies through clinical supervision and diagnostic evaluation. 3. To reduce student wastage and mass failure through improved instructional management strategies such as pupils' self-motivation in learning through mastery learning and continuous assessment techniques. The problem: justification for the training program. From independence in 1968 and until 1985, Swaziland experienced a rapid increase in enrollments at all levels. Primary schools grew from 351 in 1970 to 475 in 1985, and secondary schools from 38 to 90 during the same period. The number of teachers in the primary schools increased from 1,675 in 1975 to 4,151 in 1985. Again, during the same period, the increase in the numbers of teachers in the secondary schools was unprecedented, rising from a mere 432 in 1975 to 1,501 in 1985, a 248% increase. Similarly, student enrollment rose in 1985 in the primary and secondary schools from 69,055 and 8,027 in 1975 to 146,734 and 29,493 respectively. COSC examinations. The results of these examinations during the period 1971 to 1980 are shown in Tables 1 as well as graphically displayed in Figures 1 and 2 below. Table 1. Student performance in COSC examinations, 1970 to 1980. Last two columns show yearly national total pass by number and percentage. Source: The Status and Development of Education in the Kingdom of Swaziland, Education and Training Sector Review, The Bishop Report, 1983, Ministry of Education, Mbabane, Swaziland. Table 2. Junior Secondary School Wastage Analysis. Source: Bishop Report, 1983, Ministry of Education, Mbabane. The analysis of the above Table 2 indicates that 2,897 student years were taken to produce 192 graduating students from Form 3 out of 1,000 students and 58 repeaters who started in Form I. Table 3. Senior Secondary School Wastage Analysis. Source: Bishop Report, 1983, Ministry of Education, Mbabane. The analysis of Table 3 above indicates that 1,904 student years were taken to produce 269 graduating students from Form V out of 1,000 students and 74 repeaters who started in Form 4. The following graphs demonstrate the yearly national percentage of pass. From the year 1971 to 1980, take a look at them. Cambridge Overseas and Junior Certificate Examinations. Cambridge Overseas Certificate Examinations, COSC. In 1986, a year after the introduction of the Unesco/SIDA Management Development Training for all the personnel concerned with the administrative management of the instructional processes, the results of both the Cambridge Overseas and JC examinations showed definitive improvements. Table 4 below furnishes the Cambridge Overseas Certificate Examination School by school results for the pre-training years 1983 to 85 and the post-training years 1986 to 88 and the average of each period in the shaded columns. Table 4. Cambridge Overseas results 1983 to 1988 with computed average of 3 pre-training years and 3 post-training years. As indicated above, the first shaded column represents the results of the pre-training period and shows how low the achievement level then was. The presentation in this column is ordered by rank. The top 10 cells with the lowest achievements can be compared with the dramatic improvement they made as indicated by the last shaded column representing the results after the provision of training in management development. Figure 3 below displays a graphical comparison of student performance at the Cambridge Overseas Certificate Examination. Figure 3 COSC examination results, total by percentage pass. Note 1. Indicates the pre-management development program period, 1983 to 85 and 2. B. Indicates post-management development program period, 1986 to 88. Schools are ranked by results of pre-training years, and the results of post-training period has been plugged for comparison. In Figure 4, as can be seen, there is a dramatic improvement in the schools which traditionally performed poorly right from the first year of the training program. Figure 4. The 10 poorest performing schools' pre-training results. Post-training gains made over the pre-training results total schools. Based on the 1986 and 87 performance indicators, there was an expectation that the 1988 school results will hopefully prove that there really was a sustained upward trend as a result of the training program and that the results of the previous 2 years were not the product of chance. As displayed in Table 4, the 1988 results confirmed the expectation. Most remarkably, the performance improvements cut across virtually all the secondary schools and were not confined to those few elitist schools. The results of the 10 traditionally lowest performing schools, Figure 4, dramatically improved right from the first training year. The overall average pass of the 10 schools suddenly jumped from 12.93% of the candidates who sat for the pre-training period to 44.56% of the candidates who sat for the examination during the post-training years. Junior Certificate Examination Results. Examination Council, Ministry of Education Mbabane, Swaziland. Kana SC 437 and Mahamba SC 415 schools, for example, which showed a poor performance of 4.61% and 5.64% passes of their candidates respectively in the pre-training years, shot up to 64.32% and 59.25% passes respectively in the post-training period, Figure 4. Whatever the reasons are, it was certainly something more enduring than, perhaps, the well-known factors of improvement of socioeconomic background and personal academic ability. Furthermore, the jump in student performance from the management pre-training average of 32% to the post-training average of 50% points is some dramatic change in the overall system's development. Figure 3. Junior Certificate Examinations. The outcome of the 1987 junior secondary school results indicates the gains in scores of the students admitted to senior high school. Figure 5 displays the junior secondary school's result by class for the period 1984 to 1987. It is interesting to note that the pass level of third class for entry to the senior secondary schools being replaced by second class level. Up to 1986, pass levels were almost constant with 1% to 2% first class, about 20% second class and 40% third class passes. However, post-training results showed marked improvement with the first-class passes jumping from 2% in 1986 to 8% in 1987 and second-class from 22% to 48%, while third-class crumbled down from 39% to 11%. The number of students with merit mention rose from 10 and below during pre-training years to 25 in 1986 and 62 in 1987 post-training years. If, as it is observed in the results of the Cambridge Overseas and Junior Certificate Examination above, that the performance indicators of the entire system appeared significantly positive, then the reasons for the qualitative improvement during the period under study need to be identified and strengthened for sustainability. The present study was designed to put to test some of the possible chances or hypotheses that may have been responsible for this laudable development. Case study: the Swazi case as performance indicator. The context of the case study was predicated on the hypothesis that activities under the UNESCO/SIDA educational management development programs during the period under study 1986 to 88 may have been significantly responsible for the major improvement observed in the Swazi education. See Table 4. The study examined the management development program used, namely, in-country training of school administrators, inspectors, supervisors, head teachers and heads of subject departments, to assess the degree of multiplier effect of teacher improvement on student academic performance in external examinations. The training program. The training program involved some 10,000 person/days. The program was organized in such a way as to comprehensively cover all the secondary schools, regional administrative offices, relevant officers of the ministry headquarters, in which all the participants were brought under one roof, as it were. This coverage was possible because Swaziland is a small territory of some 100 square miles and has a population of less than 1 million. The training courses were short but highly intensive and extensive. The participants were isolated for 2 weeks at a remote teacher training college. There, the school managers were exposed to the comprehensive package of training activities. Cambridge overseas and junior certificate examination results as performance indicators. 1. The major objectives of the training were to empower the institutional managers with knowledge and skills in instructional management in order to increase their confidence in carrying out their responsibilities, and to counter a perverse sense of powerlessness and failure among teachers for the scholastic performance of their students. To convince the school managers that recently developed and clarified concepts and practices in educational management are relevant to education in Swaziland, to introduce continuous assessment practices in schools along with techniques of how they might be managed and made complementary to the examination system. 2. Methods of training. Various strategies such as large group instructions, individual and group study sessions, identification and analysis of case studies, demonstrations, practicums, etc. were used. The minister who welcomed all the participants was part of the program, encouraging all the participants. Here on the photograph you can see large group instruction and lectures, identification and analysis of case studies, demonstrations, practicums, etc. were used, and also small group identification, discussion and problem solving. In addition, the participants were exposed to inspirational leadership through carefully prepared and presented seminar papers, including case studies and forceful demonstrations of defects in educational management and recommended improvement strategies as applied to classroom practices. As part of the training method, participants were required to complete evaluation questionnaires. The results are attached in Appendices 1 and 2 of this paper, summarizing the responses by the participants. Findings. The results of the project were analyzed from 2 aspects. First, the viewpoint of trainees, participants, and secondly, the overall effect of the skills imparted on the educational personnel on the pupils, as evidenced in the pupils' performance in the COSC and JC examinations after the training program. Impact on educational personnel. The analysis was based on the results of the responses of participants to the post-training evaluation questionnaires administered to them at the end of the programs. The overall evaluation showed that the training program was highly successful. Based on the participants' responses, there were mean scores of over 79.3% and 100% positive impact on the 2 seminar workshops dealing with A. Institutional leadership and accountability in education, and B. Continuous assessment and instructional leadership, respectively. See the tables in Appendices 1 and 2, which show participants' ratings of the level of success in the achievement of the seminar/workshop objectives, as well as the evaluation of the specific achievements of the workshop designed to enhance their professional development. Impact on school program as measured by the degree of improvement in school certificate examinations over 1985 to 1988. Based on the improvement of the student performance in the external examination during the post-training intervention period 1986 to 87, it could be argued that the training packages had general multiplier effects on the participants, including improved understanding of the management of educational delivery services and consequently on the performance of the entire system. This level of improvement, one would assume, would naturally be reflected in the improved teaching of the instructors and the rate of learning among the pupils, and therefore, logically their performance in the public examinations as shown in Table 4 Figures 3 and 4 and 5. Discussion of findings. It is possible that perhaps other existing conditions might have caused the observed positive improvements in the Swazi education after the training program. For example, let us consider and discuss 3 hypothetical cases. Could it be that the standards of examinations conducted during the period were such that might have encouraged and led to very high student performance in the JC and COSC? What is being suggested is that perhaps the improvement in the performance of students in the JC and COSC examinations could have been as a result of the standards of the examination set. Student performance could dramatically improve if the standard of the examination set is lowered and the marking and grading are more liberal. The JC examination is conducted internationally for the Anglophone Southern African countries. Could the Examinations Council have shifted the goalposts? A preliminary inquiry drew a categorical denial from the registrar of the council on both counts. The hypothesis was less plausible for the Cambridge Syndicate, which has a reputation for quality and maintenance of standards. However, an inquiry was nonetheless made and, as expected, was given a negative response. Based on the credibility of those interviewed and on the reputation and reliability of these examining bodies, this preliminary hypothesis may not be tenable. The second possibility is that, perhaps, more financial and material resources were injected into the school system during the period, thus contributing to improved performance. Government records suggest that the Ministry of Education and school budgets for the period 1984 to 1989 increased only in line with inflation and not in real terms. The Education Sector Review, the Nsibben Commission, of 1984-85 deliberated on the ailing status of the education system of the nation, highlighting lack of adequate financial and resource support to schools as one of the problems. All the same, a comparison of budgetary allocation to education during the period 1986 to 88 with the increasing enrollments in junior and senior secondary schools suggests that indeed the per-pupil expenditures had actually fallen. Therefore, the near-universal primary education and increased opportunities for the education at both the junior and senior secondary school levels could not be attributed to enhanced resource availability to schools during the period. Thus, hypothesis 2 would seem to be not plausible. The third consideration is that, possibly, a very large mass of trained teachers and administrators joined the schools during the period under consideration. The third hypothesis speculates that a new generation of better trained and more highly motivated teachers might have joined the schools around 1984 and thus began the process of improved teacher performance in the classrooms, which was manifested by improved student performance from as far as can be ascertained from official records and the Education Sector Review, 1985. There was no significant quantitative increase in the number of teachers relative to enrollments in Swaziland since 1980. It is true, of course, that each year brought in more university graduate teachers into the secondary schools such that the proportion of more qualified teachers was gradually rising. The magnitude of improvement in student performance such that was recorded between 1986 and 1988 would inevitably demand a large injection into the system of technically qualified, well-motivated, and organizationally well-supervised and coordinated teachers. Since there was no such trend in the Swazi educational system during the period, the performance improvements could not therefore be solely attributable to large numbers of well-qualified teachers being absorbed into the system. Hypothesis 3 was therefore rejected. Limitations of the study. To begin with, the import of the outcomes of this program, as well as the implications for the training component of technical assistance programs in Africa, require very rigorous scrutiny of the parameters addressed for the results to be acceptable. With this in mind, some of the limitations of this study need to be recognized. In consequence, This study had to necessarily rely on proximate evidence and indirectly on student performance in Cambridge Overseas and Junior Certificate examinations as indicators of the success or otherwise of the training program. Before examining the hypothesis of this study, that activities under the UNESCO/SIDA educational management development programs during the period under study, 1986 to 88, may have been significantly responsible for the major improvement observed in the Swazi education, the investigator wishes to declare a possibility of a bias, perhaps arising from the investigator's personal involvement in the 1985 to 1987 management staff development program in Swaziland. However, it can be argued that this element of bias is taken care of by the specific performance indicators which the study has used precisely because of the fact that capacity building is a long-term process, often beyond the span of the technical assistance projects. Another source of bias could arise from the impact of the training programs offered to primary schools under the USAID Ohio University contract. The USAID project, which was concurrently running with the UNESCO/SIDA project, was confined to primary school teachers in curriculum development and teacher education, and thus, its impact was too early to be felt at the secondary school levels. In summary, the training packages had general multiplier effects on the participants, including improved understanding of the management of educational delivery services as evidenced in their responses, and consequently on the performance of the entire system. Conclusions and recommendations. Conclusions. Based on the analyses and results above, the study concluded as follows. The case study approach to training impact assessment of the technical assistance of capacity building perhaps provides more plausible results than the conventional surveys and project evaluation reports because the case studies focus more on project outcomes than on project input delivery. Capacity building of technical assistance projects, such as the UNESCO/SIDA project of Swaziland, tend to make more tangible impact when targeted to critical skills development as identified within overall national/sectorial development skills constraints. Training for capacity improvement, particularly in education, would appear to yield better results under conditions where the project/program 1 is focused on the inculcation of specific performance skills, abilities, or attitudes. 2 is phased progressively, i.e. with incremental skills and technology acquisition packages, coupled with follow-up activities at each stage of the training module. 3 ensures that as far as possible all those concerned as groups, all categories of administrators, all groups of supervisors and subject heads are exposed to the same or identified training conditions and contents. The determination of educational impact or effect of training tends to be more realistic when based on a combination of the identified wants and needs of the participants, such as trainee assessments used in combination with post-training on-the-job performance, e.g. through student performance in examinations. Recommendations. Based on the findings of the case study, it is recommended that it is necessary to review the process of capacity building projects to assure its sustainability. More often than not, such projects are terminated prematurely based on the dictates of the project documents and/or on the recommendations of evaluators who may not understand what is professionally involved. The development of appropriate skills and capacities in people take a long gestation period. Adequate provision should be made for well-drawn-up follow-up phases of training activities to assure the consolidation and proper transfer of skills. Otherwise, the transfer of learned skills could be of a temporary nature. The adverse effect of lack of continuity of training stimulus beyond the project span is clearly demonstrated in the experience, since a rapid decline in student performance was observed during 1989 to 91 after the UNESCO/SIDA project. The observation is underscored by the Chief Examination Officer's report of March 18, 1991. According to the Registrar of Examinations Council of Swaziland, comparison of the results for 1990 have shown that they have been the poorest in performance since 1988. In 1990, 5,290 candidates entered for the Cambridge GCO level examination, registering for 31,415 subjects. The number of candidates who have satisfied the basic university entry requirements of a pass in 6 subjects, 4 credits including English, are 614 in 1990 and were 789 in 1989. 3. Capacity building projects should be supplemented by regular periodic refresher courses and/or staff self-renewal programs such as regular conventions, conferences, and/or meetings organized nationally, regionally, and/or locally. At such gatherings, professionals' colleagues come together to compare and exchange experiences, share ideas and ideals, develop strategies that would hopefully help to improve individual practices. 4. More research and statistical analyses should be carried out in the aspect of capacity building and performance improvement, particularly in the area of education and training-related subjects in other African countries. Lest this observation lead to inferences that the Swazi experience might not be relevant elsewhere because of size, attention should be drawn to the following single fact that out of 46 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, UNESCO's Educational Statistical Report, 1988, no fewer than 34 have a total of 250 or less secondary schools. In other words, the Swazi experience is relevant and could be replicated in the majority of African countries. References: Duncan, W.J., 1978, Essentials of Management, Hindale, Illy, Dryden Press. Federal Republic of Nigeria, National Technical Cooperation Assessment and Program, NATCP, 1991, Report of Interministerial Dialogue on Technical Cooperation Policy for Nigeria. Lagos, Federal Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. September 1991, pages 28-29. Kingdom of Swaziland, Central Statistics Office, CSO, Statistics for Various Years, Mbabane. Kingdom of Swaziland, 1975. National Education Review Commission, NERCOM. Dlamini Commission, Report of the National Education Review, 1975, Ministry of Education, Mbabane. Kingdom of Swaziland, 1983, Manpower, Education and Training, Report of the National Manpower Survey. Bababe, Ministry of Education. Kingdom of Swaziland, 1985, National Education Review Commission, NERCOM. Nsibin Commission, Reform Through Dialogue, 1985, Ministry of Education, Mbabane. Lulsegged, 1984, Teaching and Management. Can they be the same? International Journal of Educational Development, Volume 4, Number 2. UK, Pergamon Press Limited, pages 113-121. Lulsegged, H.M., 1985, Dialogue to Reform in Education, Challenge of Swaziland, January 1985. Identification of Needs based on the National Education Sector Review of 1985 and Recommendations to Overcome the Problems and Issues Raised at the Commission's Deliberations. Marks Sir J. R. Stoops, E. and King Stoops, J. 1978, Handbook of Educational Supervision, A Guide for the Practitioners, Alan Bacon, Boston. Ministry of Education, Planning and Research Unit, Educational Statistics Report 1970 to 1980 Mbabane. 11. Ministry of Education, Education and Training Sector Review, The Bishop's Report 1983 Mbabane. Ministry of Education, Planning Research and Unit, School Mapping Survey 1985. 13. USAID, 1984, Swaziland, Modified Assessment of Education and Human Resources Development. Second draft unpublished, Mbabane, Ministry of Education. UNESCO, Educational Statistical Report, 1988. 15. World Bank Report, 1987, Education Policies for Sub-Saharan Africa, Adjustment, Revitalization and Expansion. Washington, D.C. World Bank. Appendix I. Participants' evaluation of the seminar/workshop on institutional leadership and accountability in education. The level of success in the achievement of the seminar/workshop objectives. The participants' assessment is shown in Table App 1 below. On the whole, supervisory, administrative issues and problems, strategies for motivation, leadership and coordination of the teaching staff, right through to accountability and procedures for improvement of instruction, were rated as having been highly successful, all items scored above 70%. In effect, the mean item success score level may be put at 80.5%, which is considered as outstanding. A one-way ANOVA on the data showed a significant consistency and relationship in the participants' ratings. Table App 1. Participants' ratings of the level of success in achievement of the seminar workshop objectives. Note: asterisk cumulative scores derived from participants' ratings on the 5-point scale. Mean score for the 77 participants. Percent of the mean. Evaluation of specific seminar/workshop activities. The participants were asked to evaluate and rate the specific activities of the seminar workshop with a view to determining those that perhaps were not properly treated or developed. Table App 1-2 below provides the responses of the participants on the adequacy, suitability, or otherwise on each of the following: the theme, topics treated, timing, papers, papers presented, panel and group discussions, group activities, the group recommendations, development of the procedures handbook, the administrative arrangements, the catering and boarding arrangements, the interpersonal interactions, the conduct of the consultants, the contributions of the program, etc. It was gratifying that none of the activities of the seminar/workshop was rated at less than 70% successful. Indeed, about 5 of the activities were rated as perfect, 100%. Table App 1. Participants' evaluation of the specific activities, events, and conditions of the seminar/workshop. Note: X asterisk equals derived from scores on the deviations from the ideal, 3, or the ideal points across the 77 respondents. X asterisk asterisk equals the mean for items 17 to 30 are based on X derived by 77. Percent asterisk 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 equals positive rating is based on the mean score, X, over the ideal point, max 3. Thus the mean score 3 equals 100%. Plus equals items 31 to 37 are computed differently. They are based on the 5 points rating scale, as in Table App 1-1 above. The participants' ratings of specific topics dealing with various leadership techniques, motivational strategies for effectiveness, effective executive skills, and papers on continuous assessment are shown on Table App 1-3 below. As can be observed from the table, top on the list of presentations and resources most valued by the participants were the techniques of leadership and motivation plus materials on effective management for executives and on continuous assessment. However, the participants were frank on indicating that some of the topics or strategies such as the PPBS, financial management, and career guidance were of less strategic impact or importance to them. Table App 1-3. Participants' assessment of the various supervisory/management techniques taught and materials used at the seminar/workshop. Projected usefulness of the seminar/workshop on the future performance of the participants. The participants were asked to indicate to what extent and for what purpose they thought they would use the knowledge and skills they acquired during the seminar/workshop. The results of the participants' responses are shown on Table App 1-4 below. The most outstanding use to which the participants felt that they would make of the skills and techniques acquired were for the improvement of the instructional quality in their schools or colleges, followed by such other uses as improved leadership role, better accountability, and more appropriate coordination. It was felt that these responses were very satisfactory since they directly touched on the major problems and issues indicated under the introduction earlier in this report. Table App 4. Participants' indication of the use to which they would put the knowledge gathered at the seminar/workshop. Overall impact of the seminar/workshop on the professional development of the participants. Table App 1-5 below shows the result of the participants' ratings of this crucial question of the program. The participants were asked to rate on the whole, in percentage score, their frank assessment of the entire program effect on them. It was gratifying to note that the mean score was 79.3%, indicating a very high level of success of the program. Table App 1-5. Participants' final/overall grading of the level of success of the seminar/workshop. The overall percentage of success of the course is put at 74.5%. Appendix I. Participants' evaluation of the seminar/workshop on continuous assessment and instructional leadership. Conference participants' opinions on key aspects of continuous assessment and instructional leadership in Swaziland. The principal aims of the conference were to enable participants to develop considerable and informed views about continuous assessment practice and to communicate to the ministry the strengths and direction of professional opinion on certain key issues before implementation stage. This section of the report provides an analysis of the participants' opinions on the issues. The need and relevance of continuous assessment in the Swaziland educational system, Table 3. Table App 2-1. Participants' opinions of the need and relevance of continuous assessment in Swaziland. Table App 2-1 above indicates that almost all the participants feel that continuous assessment is very relevant to, and therefore seriously needed, in Swaziland education system. A large percentage of the participants agreed that continuous assessment should be designed and used a. to promote improved student motivation and achievement, b. to improve diagnosis of learning problems and remediation, and c. in combination with the national examination results to give a single published result. Implications of continuous assessment practice for school instructional programs. Table App 2-2. Participants' views on the implications and modalities of continuous assessment practice to school instructional programs. From Table App 2-2 above, it was evident that almost all the participants believed in the imperative needs for a. clear definition of instructional objectives, b. measure of both the cognitive and non-cognitive aspects of student development, c. clear national guidelines on continuous assessment practice from the national level, d. development and use of a national assessment items bank, common national procedures for recording and interpreting results, f. comparability of standards between and among all schools, g. between school standards to be statistically moderated and nationally controlled, h. adaptation of existing national subject panels to serve in continuous assessment exercises, e.g. for coordination of subject areas, creation of item banks and development of guidelines specific to subject areas. On the need and direction of training for continuous assessment. Table App 2-3. Participants' views on the need and direction of staff training for continuous assessment. From the above table, Table App 2-3, it was clear that almost all the participants were strongly convinced that there would be need for training and in-service courses for almost all categories of operational and supervisory staff, inspectors, heads of schools, subject heads and classroom teachers, so as to introduce realistically the techniques of continuous assessment, as well as to train them in time and resource management. Overall estimation of the worth of the conference. Table App 2-4. Participants' estimate of the overall worth of the conference on continuous assessment. From the above result, it was definitely clear that all the participants felt that the conference was very worthwhile, 100% all categories. This result underscores the expressed views in group reports, discussions, and concluding remarks by all the participants that the conference had great merit and was indeed fruitful and good.